So at this point, I don't think this conversation should be too surprising to anybody. We've been talking about the Montreal Canadiens and their defense situation for the past few months. We've made a few videos talking about multiple guys, and now, because it's the off-season, well, no, it's not really, but for the Canadiens, it's the off-season, I think now is time to go out there and start reading some articles, refer to some of the analysts, and talk about what the Canadiens' trade situation could entail. So, we're heading over onto the Montreal Gazette because there was an article published by Pat Hickey from earlier on April 19th. This will be linked in the description, and of course, it's all there if you want to take a look at it yourself. But Pat Hickey says in the headline of this article, the Montreal Canadiens have too many young, talented defensemen. With so many blue liners pushing for NHL ice time next season, the onus will be on Habs brass to properly identify who they need to keep. Now, I like the way the article opens up. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, especially if you've been a Canadiens fan for a while. Marc Bergevin was fond of saying you can never have too many defensemen. But as the Canadiens address what could be a busy offseason, they might have too many defensemen. Now, pause before we go deeper into this article. Who exactly do the Canadiens have as potential options? Well, Alex from Abs Coverage on Twitter went out there and gave us a rundown. There are 11 defensemen that could make the Montreal Canadiens next season. You've got Justin Barron, Kaiden Guhle, Jordan Harris, Lane Hutson, Johnathan Kovacevic, Logan Mailloux, Mike Matheson, David Reinbacher, David Savard, Jayden Struble, and Arber Xhekaj. My goodness, somebody is going to have to move. And it's not because they're bad. They just got too many guys. And I know the thing is, it's a good problem to have. You got a ton of defensemen, ton of guys, so many names that you could choose on their team with varying levels of development, varying ages, and varying skill levels. But to be honest, if you had to form a D-core of 6 of these 11 guys, you could realistically pick any of these guys, and they'll all have a fairly similar chance. Of course, Reinbacher is probably a little bit lower because I think a lot of people could project that his development will be a lot slower into next season. I don't think he's going to be a Canadian right away. But everybody else, they've all had enough time in the system. Some of these guys are a lot younger than others, so you could justifiably give them minutes and say that they're going to be noteworthy pieces on the team. Maybe not even the best players per se, but the best potentials, and use them in spots where they can actually grow that potential. Long story short, there are a lot of guys. And being able to mix both the guys at the top of the age range and at the bottom will be a pretty interesting task. Because, of course, from this list, there are older guys that I think we should all pretty much guarantee are going to be on the roster should they still be a part of the team. Matheson, Savard, these guys are probably going to be here, but everybody else, you could ask who should make it, and then you have the inevitable, damning outcome of having to send any of these guys down to Laval. And we already know that Laval had their own situation with defense. They had a lot of guys there too, so some guys decided to leave. It was not really ideal, and so now, 11 guys. That's almost 2 teams worth of defensemen right there. So it's definitely crowded. With this in mind, let's go back to the article published on the Montreal Gazette. There's something appealing about having a depth chart that goes 11 players deep on defense, with 8 of those players being under the age of 23. This is a best crop of young defensemen since the Canadiens won their last Stanley Cup in 1993, with names such as Eric Desjardins, Matthew Schneider, and Patrice Brisebois. The problem is there's not enough room for all of them on the roster, and while there is the potential to have the AHL's best defense core in Laval, the key is for the Canadiens to identify which players can contribute to a future playoff run and which might be swapped for some much-needed help up front. The task for Marty St. Louis and the front office became more difficult with the much-anticipated debuts of Lane Hutson and Logan Mailloux. Long story short, all of these guys are capable, so which ones are worth investing your future into? Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes won't be afraid to make a trade involving a promising defenseman if the deal is right. 2 years ago, they parted with Alexander Romanov to get Kirby Dach, and that worked out much better than the time Bergevin sent Mikhail Sergachev to Tampa Bay for Johnathan Drouin. Okay, it's 2024, man. Why are we still dunking on Johnathan Drouin? Does he really deserve that at this point? Okay, I guess he's right when he says that, though. If there is a deal, it should not involve veterans Mike Matheson or David Savard. There are suggestions on social media that the Canadiens should move Matheson because his value is high, but you don't move your number one defenseman who is among the league leaders in minutes played and defense scoring. At 30 years old, he has many productive seasons ahead of him, and he is a homeboy who speaks French. Savard is a shot-blocking savant who, alongside Matheson, provides leadership and an example for the younger defenseman. His greatest value will be at the trade deadline next season. If the Canadiens are in a playoff run, they will need him. If not, he'll be an attractive add for any playoff-bound team that needs a physical shot blocker. Now, talking about guys that got moved this prior deadline in the same sort of physical mold that a David Savard had, you saw Joel Edmondson go over to the Leafs, for example. That's the big name that pops out to me. But Savard, Matheson, this article is pretty much saying, yeah, no, keep these guys. We'll benefit more by having them on the team than sending them away. But with everybody else on tap, who's to say that a Mikhail Sergachev or an Alexander Romanov-esque trade is not impossible? Now, if you wanted to draw from patterns, it's tougher to do that with this crop of guys because none of the guys that we had talked about are Russian, so that eliminates the automatic Russian guy getting sent away. But when it comes to this group of guys, I think the most projectably movable guy is Jordan Harris, mostly because of the rumors that we had already seen about him wanting out and potentially being an option for other teams. There were some rumors saying that Calgary was interested in him and his services. I don't know if that's all too true anymore, considering the fact that Calgary got so many young defensemen from Hanley to Miramanov to Brustevich and Braden Prashal. They've been getting a ton of defensemen, a lot of them young as well, from different trades and waiver wire pickups. So maybe Jordan Harris is not really somebody that they value too much anymore. You could probably toss Kovacevic's name into that as well, but then again, I don't really think Kovacevic moves the needle all too much. Like, yeah, he's young-ish, he's got another season on his contract, and he's fairly okay, but how often do okay guys get traded for anything that's actually worth it for the opposite team? I'm not too sure. Kovacevic is also 26, so if you wanted to debate whether or not his value is really worth it, considering he is huge, is that an option you just rather would see stick around on the team? Is Justin Barron's role with the Canadiens limited, since he has been up and down and not really the most stable on the blue line in terms of role? If Arber Xhekaj is not a full-time Canadian, or if he still struggles through some penalty issues, then does he get put on the block? Does he get traded or just sent down to Laval? There are so many guys here. And honestly, I think if you really wanted to, label it down, there are only 3 quote-unquote untouchable guys amongst this group. I'd say Kaiden Guhle is untouchable, I'd say Lane Hutson is untouchable, and I'd say David Reinbacher is untouchable too. Arber Xhekaj is interesting. He could be untouchable depending on what it is you value, but because his name has circulated amongst the rumor mill a lot this season, I don't know if it's fully, guaranteed that he does not get traded ever. Like, if there is an offer that Kent Hughes can't refuse, then maybe we see some sort of a trade. I don't know. It'd be kind of weird if they did that, though, right? Like, imagine trading away Arber Xhekaj, but still having Florian Xhekaj doing his thing with the regular Canadiens and AHL team in the meantime. It'd be the exact same situation as Chicago and Kirby Dach, because they drafted Colton Dach and eventually traded Kirby away whilst Colton was still a prospect of the organization, but still, could the Canadiens pull something off like that too? Jayden Struble is a guy who, if you really wanted to twist my arm, I could probably depart with him if the return really is good enough. Kaiden Guhle, I'd say probably a no-go on him. Hutson, no-go. Mailloux, that's a tough one, honestly. If the Canadiens traded Mailloux away, I think it would be a little bit weird that it would happen now. Like, I feel like if the Canadiens were so okay with the idea of trading away a Mailloux, they probably would have done it earlier. Considering the entire controversy and how Kent Hughes picked up this team and Mailloux was already there with that history attached to him, they had opportunities to maybe explore the trade market in the past, but they didn't. They didn't end up executing on whatever deal. They worked with him and checked in with him, so now they're confident enough to put him in the NHL to end off the season. So I won't really say that he's a guarantee to be traded either, but either way, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as to whom the Canadiens will trade on their blue line, because it's getting very apparent that they kind of have to do that. There are too many guys, and while it's normally not a problem, you could very well say it is here. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the Montreal Canadiens defense. Article will be linked in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.